Well, hello and welcome back to Supposedly Fun. My name is Greg. I am here today to discuss another year-end best list. So I did the New York Times top 10 books of 2020, which I will link down below. I reacted to them. I thought that was a really good list. And I thought it was really a fun thing to do. And I tend to really like year-end best lists. So I've been kind of keeping my eye out for another one that I could cover and react to. And Entertainment Weekly released their best of list, and I thought it was a good one because it covers some books I've already talked about on best of lists, some books that haven't made other lists, and some books I've read, some books I haven't read. It's a mix. I think there's at least one nonfiction title, and then it completely falls off a cliff at the end and makes what I think is a staggeringly bad choice for favorite book of the year. But we will get to that. That's your tease to keep watching, if such things work. I don't know. So I'm not going to get into Entertainment Weekly too much. I used to be a huge fan of Entertainment Weekly. I have not been much of a fan over the last 5 years or so. I feel like a lot of the editorial decisions and directions that they've taken haven't been great, but I still follow. And they used to have a really great book section. Now that section has shrunk considerably, but they still include books in their year-end list. So let's see what they chose. The first one, and they actually ranked these. So their number 10 pick is A Burning by Megha Majumdar. This is something that was longlisted for the National Book Award, I believe, but did not make the shortlist. And something that I haven't really seen pop up on a lot of year-end best lists, but was something that I was really interested in reading. I was hoping to read it in 2020 and didn't get around to it. And I'm glad to see it on at least one year-end best list. So let's see what they say. They do very short blurbs. So, centered on a terrorist act at a Kolkata train station, Majumdar's debut refracts its story through three vastly different souls: a young girl from the slums, her officious male teacher, and a transgender beggar named Lovely. The result is both seamless and thrilling, a tale of modern India drawn in lightning. And all of that sounds fascinating to me. So this is something that is definitely on my radar for 2021. I'm hoping to get to it. Even though I haven't read it, I am glad to see this getting some attention in a year-end best list. So that's their number 10 pick. Coming in at number 9 is a nonfiction book. It's Red Comet by Heather Clark. And this is a biography of Sylvia Plath. They say, a 1,000-page plus biography of Sylvia Plath, you say. Improbably, perhaps, there's something here for everyone. A treasure trove of artifacts for fans, a searing reflection of a genius's work for scholars, and for general readers, a life chronicled with propulsion like a thriller, almost too good to be true. I have actually never read anything by Sylvia Plath. I know that seems shocking, because a lot of people read The Bell Jar in high school. I did not. And I've never read anything else by her as well. So, and that's something I feel like I really need to work on and fix. Maybe 2021, who knows? We'll see. So I feel like I need to read something by her before I could even think about a biography of her, especially such a big, hefty one. But I've heard a lot of really good things about this, and maybe that would actually be a good introduction to Sylvia Plath and her work. I don't know, maybe something I'll have to think about. But I know I've heard really good things about this book. The people I know who have read or have seen read it on social media have enjoyed it as well. And it seems, despite its length, have described it as sort of engrossing. So it's interesting to see that Entertainment Weekly thought the same. Coming in at number 8 is Daddy by Emma Cline. This is a collection of short stories. I have not read this one. I read Emma Cline's novel, The Girls, which I think was her debut. I could be wrong about that. And I had very mixed feelings about it. Part of that is because I don't know if you've ever heard the concept for a book and then had a very set thing in your mind about what you expect it to be, and then you read it and it's not that. And it's disappointing because all you can think is, well, this is how I would have done it if I wrote it. Okay, a bit of a rough edit here. I got interrupted in the middle of my video, and usually I would just edit this together and not comment on it at all. But in the time that I was on a work call, the sun sash came back. So I feel like I should just point that out, and I had to move the camera a little bit. So anyway, let's get back to it. We're talking about Daddy by Emma Cline. I was in the middle of talking about Girls, which was her previous book, and how my perception of it was very different from what the book actually is. And that's not fair, because books can go in different directions. They can go in whatever direction they want. I just think that the direction Emma Cline went was weak. And that's why I kept thinking about what I would have done instead. For instance, in that book, so if you're not unfamiliar, The Girls is about a girl who is, as a teenager in the late 60s or early 70s, gets pulled into a cult, very similar to Charles Manson's. And the story is told by that girl in the present day when she's obviously much older. And it's as if she didn't really trust the reader to make a lot of the connections. And so she's using the framework of the older, wiser person looking back at what happened to put everything into context for the reader. And I didn't like that. So I've been a little hesitant. I would try another Emma Cline book, but I'm not rushing out to do it. I have heard good things about Daddy, and that is kind of, I still don't think I'm going to be rushing out for it, but let's see what they say. The people who populate the short stories in Daddy are frankly, for the most part, pretty terrible. Bullies and cheaters, liars and lost souls, paragons of self-delusion. But even in snapshot mode, Cline manages to bring them vividly to life in diamond-sharp sentences that cut and cauterize on every page. And from having read Girls, I believe that she'd be able to do that. But also, even without having read The Girls, that doesn't feel like something that I'm going to rush out to read. It's something that would be on my radar. I might be interested in it at some point, but I'm not in any kind of a hurry to do it. And the fact that I have that past experience with Girls makes me a little less likely to get to it anytime soon. Coming in at number 7, Deacon King Kong by James McBride. This was also on the New York Times top 10 of the year. I read it, and I thought it was fine. The New York Times particularly praised it for the multitude of stories that it told. To me, that was actually the problem, because it told so many stories and had so many different voices that it all became muddied. So we are at different opinions in that regard. Let's see what Entertainment Weekly says. Good luck finding a box to put this one in. The good Lord Bird author went even wilder with this boisterous, imaginative, tender foray into the late 1960s Brooklyn. Set in the aftermath of a shooting and zigzagging around dozens of characters, it at times plays like a tense mystery, at others a lazy hangout comedy, which again, they are liking the things that I didn't like about it. I feel like it does sometimes feel like a mystery, sometimes it feels like a thriller, sometimes it feels like a lazy hangout. And to me, that's the problem. I really enjoyed The Good Lord Bird, but I didn't feel like this book had a focus. But the fact that it is showing up on all of these year-end lists does make me wonder if this is a really good contender for the Pulitzer Prize next year. And we'll have to wait and see what happens with that. I feel like James McBride, because of his past books, like The Good Lord Bird, The Color of Water, is somebody who will definitely be on the radar of a Pulitzer jury. This is not a Pulitzer Prize prediction video, but I feel like it's interesting because Colson Whitehead has won 2 Pulitzers in the last decade, and it feels like they've already kind of covered some of the ground that James McBride would be doing, but I'm starting to think he really has a shot with Deacon King Kong. And again, since I didn't really like the book, that would be a little disappointing to me. He probably should have won it for The Good Lord Bird if he's going to win it, but we'll see. I mean, I don't dislike this book, I just didn't like it. So, oh well. Coming in at number 6 for Entertainment Weekly is a book that I did love. It's Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell. And I'm not going to really gush about this too much, because if you follow along, you've heard me talk about this at length by now. I really loved this book. Let's see what they say. This portrait of unfathomable grief, raging virus, and artistic inspiration may have felt particularly suited for 2020, but O'Farrell's style is more timeless, more surprising too. Who knew the fictionalized story of the death of Shakespeare's son could hum with such vitality? I think they really captured this book very well with that description. And it is a book that feels of the time in which it is set, and yet very timely right now and urgent. And of course, there's no way that Maggie O'Farrell could have understood how timely this book would be when she was writing it, because how would she have known that it would be released in a pandemic? But I do feel like that raises the stakes a little bit. But even without that, it's just a beautiful book, really well written. I have mentioned that I would really like to reread this at some point in 2021, but listen to the audiobook, because I feel like the language in it is so beautiful that I kind of found myself reading it out loud to myself at certain points. And I feel like an audiobook would be a really great way of listening to this. Debate continues to rage over which cover is better, the UK or the US. I originally liked the UK cover better, but I feel like the US cover captures the tone and the mood of the book better, so I've really come around on it. But it will be interesting to see what the paperback design in both the UK and the US is. I feel like it'll probably be different. Jen the librarian and I were kind of chatting about that in a previous comment, so it'll be interesting to see what the paperback design looks like. But I love this book, and I think it is a worthy contender for this list. It was the Women's Prize winner, in fact. Coming in at number 5 is a very new release. It's Memorial by Bryan Washington. They say Washington's first novel vividly examines the flailing romance of two men as they're separated by circumstance. But most memorably, it's a feast for the senses, the author's love of food, feel for sexual chemistry, and fascination with different cultures make for the best kind of immersion. That does sound really interesting, and it is something that I'm looking forward to. I had read Bryan Washington's, I DNF'd Bryan Washington's short story collection lot. It felt like a talented writer, a lot of ideas. I didn't really like the execution. So what I told myself was I was going to put it to the side and then try to check in with him when he released something else. And here is the something else. And by all accounts, this has been a great book. I feel like it's too new to have ended up on a lot of different radar screens. So I'm glad it made it onto at least this one. And it is something I'm really looking forward to. I don't think I'll be getting to it by the end of this year, but I'm hoping to get to it at some point in 2021. At number 4, they have Leave the World Behind by Rumaan Alam. This is getting harder to avoid. That little sun sash. But anyway, I did read this one. This was a finalist for the National Book Award. I thought it was a good contender for the win. It did not win, but here's what they say. It's the end of the world as we know it, and nobody feels fine. Somehow, though, Alam has managed to write a dystopian novel that still reads like the best kind of escapism. A thrummingly smart tale of race and class in a Lux Hamptons rental teetering on the edge of apocalypse. And I think that's all accurate. I have some problems with this book, but I also think it does very smart things. And I think it captures how people would genuinely react to a sort of apocalyptic circumstances or the uncertainty of not knowing what's going on when you have come to rely so much on the internet and on social media and your phone to figure out what's going on and to keep up to date with what's happening. And when those are taken away from you, how uncertain you feel. And it does have really interesting things about race and class as well. But for me, there's enough negative that it will not be on my favorite books of the year. I respect anybody who does put it on their best of the year, but it's not for me. And let's just leave it at that. At number 3 is another book that was on the New York Times top 10 of the year, Homeland Elegies by Akhtar. This is something that I feel like more and more I have more and more urgency than I need to read. Again, probably won't get to it this year, but maybe in 2021. The latest from the Pulitzer-winning playwright and author can't strictly be called fiction. His kaleidoscopic portrait of alienation and identity in a post-9/11 world is too starkly personal for that. Instead, in ferociously resonant prose, he explores what it is to be an artist and a citizen living in his American skin. And I think that's one of the things that the New York Times in particular on the podcast has talked about, this fusion of biography and fiction, and autobiography and fiction in particular, because a lot of it kind of takes ideas from his life and then fictionalizes them. And it seems like it does it in such a resonant way that it really gets at something about the American experience and what it is to be American. And it sounds like a fascinating book that kind of plays with the border between fiction and reality, which is something that the real world is doing as well. Coming in at number 2, another one of my favorite books of the year, Transcendent Kingdom by Gyasi. Let's see what they say first. Trading in the sweep of her 2016 debut, Homegoing, for a more precise, layered novel, Gyasi showcases remarkable range with this tale of a Ghanaian family in Alabama. Her incisive exploration of faith in immigrant communities made for some of the year's most engrossing storytelling. I agree with everything in that. I think this book is like a tapestry of different themes, and it does all of them really, really well. It is a very interesting book about immigration. It's a very interesting book about religion. It's a very interesting book about relationships and addiction and family. And I love it. I think it works on so many different levels. And I was a huge fan of Homegoing. So it's really great that Gyasi stuck the landing on her follow-up. I really deeply enjoyed this book and am glad to see it show up. This was the book that when I read it, I predicted would win the Pulitzer Prize next year. I kind of made a long shot prediction on that. And I do think it has a really good shot, but now, especially since Deacon King Kong has been showing up on so many year of best lists, I'm starting to think it's going to be Deacon King Kong, but it's really early. They don't announce the Pulitzer until April, so I'm just really getting ahead of myself. But I would love to see this one win because I think it's a really smart book, a really heartfelt book, and it does a lot of great things. And since I'm talking about it, I'm going to make my recommendation, which is if you like Transcendent Kingdom or are interested in it, please also check out The Secret Lives of Church Ladies by Disha Filia. I read this short story collection, and it reminded me of a lot of what you find in Transcendent Kingdom, and I think if you enjoy that, you will enjoy this as well. I love it. It's not on Entertainment Weekly's list. I just wanted to give it a shout out. And because the sun is being wild, I'm going to try to move over here to get out of the way of my son. And now I fully have a sun sash to talk about their final choice, their number one pick for the year, which to me is wild and terrible, and I don't understand. Coming in first place on Entertainment Weekly's list is The Glass Hotel by Emily St. John Mandel. This is something I read back in April or May, I believe April, when it was released. I did it as a buddy read with Britta Bowler. We both really did not like this book. And it's interesting to me because it's not that I hated this book. It's not that I passionately dislike it and don't think anybody should read it. To me, it's just a total nothing burger of a book. And that sounds really harsh. But because of that, it makes it unfathomable to me that someone would call it the best book of the year over Hamnet, over Transcendent Kingdom, over Homeland Elegies. I would read Deacon King Kong 10 times before I would read The Glass Hotel again, because again, to me, it's just a big nothing. And I'll put my full review of it down below. So let's hear what they say first. There's nothing transparent about Emily St. John Mandel's moody, mesmerizing trick of a novel, a book built, not unlike its namesake hotel, as a sort of haunted memory palace, full of blind corners and hidden cul-de-sacs. The plot, such as it is, concerns a struggling composer in Toronto, a beautiful young woman named Vincent, and a New York hedge fund titan whose famed financial wizardry may not be what it seems. When their paths converge at the remote Canadian resort of the title, the consequences will ricochet from the wilds of British Columbia to the concrete canyons of Manhattan and beyond. If Glass bites off a lot about sex and power, money and family, fate and coincidence, it does it with supreme style and intoxicating enigma till the end. And I disagree with all of that. I mean, all of it. I think they hint at part of the problem. It bites off a lot. So when Britta and I were reading this, what we kept talking about was if it's shocking that I believe that it was Emily St. John Mandel's sixth book, because it feels like a debut novel. It feels like an author who's trying to put together like a jigsaw puzzle of a book, but doesn't know how to make the pieces fit and doesn't have the skill. It's something that Emily St. John Mandel clearly enjoys, because that's the same approach she did in Station 11, which was her previous book. And I think she does better in that one, but I think she does it too hard, because the problem with Station 11 to me was that it's too interconnected. It has a bunch of different storylines that all ultimately tie back to each other, and that starts to feel extremely constrained and predictable to me. And ultimately, I thought, harmed the book. And in this one, it feels like she's piecing all of these stories together, and they don't actually say anything. They don't really make any kind of coherent point. Like, it plays with sex and power, money and family, fate and coincidence, but kind of similar to how I thought all of the different stuff going on muddied Deacon King Kong. I thought the same thing was here, but at least Deacon King Kong actually does say things. And to me, this book just doesn't. And the commenter recently was like, oh, it's about different perspectives on crime and people who commit crimes and what they do. And it's like, no, I get that. I just don't think the book says anything interesting about those people and those lives. And it also illustrates far too much. Like, there are a lot of people, basically it takes the idea in certain points that ordinary people can make very bad decisions that make them do bad things over time. And then it has another character that proves that same point. And then another character that proves that same point. And then another character that proves the same point. And it's like, oh my God, I didn't need all of these characters to get that. You could have just had the one and it would have been fine. But it just keeps beating you over the head with that, do you get it? Do you get it? Do you get it? And I didn't like it. I didn't like that at all. So very surprising to me. And again, I will link my full review of The Glass Hotel down below. It's just really, I read this book. I had an advanced copy of it that Steve Donahue was kind enough to send to me. And ultimately, I traded it in at my local used bookstore because it did not spark joy in me at all. And You know, I am actually, I'm thinking a lot about my personal best of 2020 and my worst of 2020, and it's been a very good reading year, and I don't really have a lot that I can point to as a worst. Because last year, in 2019, I read a lot of books that I thought were bad to the point of making me angry. And I think what's really surprising about Glass Hotel is I just keep forgetting about it, and that's probably the worst thing I can say about it too. It's just like I said at the beginning, it's a nothing burger of a book, and to me, it's just like it doesn't even exist. I'm so indifferent to it that it's not even on my radar, and that makes it really surprising that it would show up at number one on a list. And I'm being very mean about this, but it's just very surprising to me. If you disagree, go ahead. Leave a comment down below and let's talk about it. Let's fight about the Glass Hotel, something I don't even think about on an everyday basis. But yeah, let me know. And if you think, I know a lot of people love Station 11, so it feels a little bit like there's a halo effect, or maybe there's a halo effect. I don't know. I'm kind of reaching and speculating right now. But to me, it's very surprising that this would be a number one book on somebody's list. And if you love it, I'm sorry. But please show your work in the comment section down below. And I would love to hear what you've been loving this year, what you've been hating this year. If you agree that this was it was a decent list until it got to the number one for me. And I just think it's a staggering choice. So, sorry. Hashtag sorry, not sorry. Anyway, as always, I really appreciate your time. If you follow along, I appreciate that even more. Thank you. And as always, I will be back. Until next time, happy reading.